Hey, it's Jorge from brewbeerandDrinkit.com, and today what I'm going to be doing is reviewing my Dunkelweizen beer. Now, one of the nice things about this beer is that it can be a kind of a nice beer for breakfast. It's not exactly quite noon yet, but oh well. Guess I have to make a video so I can post it for my Friday newsletter, but anyways, my throat's been hurting a bit for this week, so apologize if my voice is a little bit raspy. But anyways, there's a couple things that I want to talk about this beer, as far as what exactly is a Dunkelweizen, and what was my thinking behind brewing this specific beer the way that I brewed this beer. Because when you think of a Dunkelweizen, you're basically taking what will be a Hefeweizen and a Munich Dunkel and kind of blending those together. It's really what the beer would be. And a Munich Dunkel is basically, you're taking just Munich malt and you're adding a little bit of color by adding a little bit of chocolate or something like Carafa Special. And usually those are just to add color, not so much flavor. And it's kind of like the same thing when it comes to a Dunkelweizen. You're basically taking what would be a Hefeweizen, and then you're adding some of the Munich malt to it, and then what I think is optional is both the chocolate or the Carafa Special. So you can brew something that's something like this, where it's somewhat of a light copper color, and it can go as dark as like, I guess will be like somewhat of a mahogany brown color. Now, one thing to keep in mind about the appearance of this beer is that this is coming from a keg, and it's still it's a little bit hazy from the yeast, but it's obviously not as hazy as if I would have bottled this beer, and if I were able to actually roll the beer, mix the yeast into the beer. And so I pulled a little bit of beer from the very beginning, so you can see how this beer, is the same beer. So obviously this just has all the yeast in it, so you can see it's a lot darker because of the yeast. So you can see the role that yeast actually plays in giving the color to this beer. So anyways, aside from that, the main thing about a Dunkelweizen that I think is important to get right as far as flavor goes is to get that really, really rich melanoidin flavor. Now, I just cannot see any other way of getting this flavor unless you do a decoction mash. I don't think you can get the same exact character if you use crystal malts or even melanoidin malt. I think you really have to go for the decoction mash. I know some brewers may use something like Crystal 40, maybe even something like Crystal 120 or Special B, and I just don't think you get the same caramel character, because the thing about melanoidin is that it's not exactly a caramel flavor. Melanoidin malt is it's kind of a mix between caramel and what would be that bready, like that very malty, toasty, biscuity flavor. And really what this beer is supposed to taste like is essentially bread. So I mean, this will really be a liquid bread is what it would be. And that's exactly the character that I'm getting on this beer. My taste tester, my sister, she doesn't drink at all, doesn't really like beer, but she'll try mine every now and then. I handed her a sample and say, like, tell me what you think. Without me explaining any of this, of course, what you said basically is it tastes like bread. So that's a good thing to hear from someone who doesn't drink beer, and it's just basically telling me the flavors that are showing up on the beer. So I think that as far as the flavor goes, everything's right. Color wise, I'm gonna kind of mix it in to kind of see the difference, from what it is right now, and if it has a little bit of yeast. But I think it's just fine. You know, I mentioned in my brewing newsletter when I brewed the Dunkelweizen that if you want to get that darker color that you may see in some of the commercial examples, like you know, whatever Dunkelweizens, you know, they have a little bit of a darker color to them. Usually the way they go about it is by adding a little bit of chocolate malt or something like Carafa Special. And again, the amounts that are used are very, very small. They're not really supposed to add any flavor. Carafa Special, we're talking about 1 ounce, maybe 2 ounces tops. And you know, preferably added similar to the way I did my black lager, my Schwarzbier. You know, do it after the mash when you're lautering. That's the kind of stuff that you want to do if you want to do just a color adjustment for that. But like I said, it's really not necessary. So I'm actually going to do this now. This is my version of rolling the bottle and adding yeast to the beer. So there it is, a little bit of yeast going into the beer. So it darkens up the beer just a bit. You know, it's still in that lighter version. It's not exactly the darker brown mahogany-like color, but it's definitely not a light color like a Hefeweizen is. So, and again, really what makes these beers darker is that haziness and coming from the yeast. In the case of Dunkelweizen will be the Carafa chocolate malt. Actual Hefeweizen, it's a lighter color. It will have a higher SRM only because of the yeast, but it's really a lighter color beer. So, anyways, other than that, like I said, the bready flavor on this beer is very strong, and again, it's coming from that melanoidin formation. Going back to my brew day, what I remember is on that very first decoction mash, when I saw the wort and the grains darken up, and when I went to add the grains back into my main mash tun, I smelled the melanoidin formation, and that's exactly what I was looking for. You know, when I first went to try this beer, I wanted to make sure that that character was showing up, because that's really where the key lies in brewing this beer, is that first decoction where, you know, you're really pushing your boil there. The bready flavor is strong, but it's not so strong that it covers the yeast character of the beer, because this still has that typical Hefeweizen yeast character, where it's that bubblegum like banana phenolic flavor. And I mean, when you actually think about it, it's almost like a I guess what I would imagine as eating banana nut bread with a Hefeweizen. Like, it has a lot of that you know, the yeast character gives it that banana like flavor, and you get that nutty flavor from the melanoidin formation. Very bready, so you know, when you put it all in together, that's basically what it's tasting like. Very, very good beer. I'm really happy with the recipe. Like I said, this is one of the styles that I normally prefer to bottle. Though as of late, I haven't really given myself time to bottle any beers. But this recipe is probably going to stay as is. If I ever do any kind of color adjustments just to make it a little bit darker, it's really only going to be maybe adding an ounce or two of Carafa Special. I don't really plan on adding any chocolate malt to this beer. I think it's just fine as it is. So anyways, I recommend it. You know, this is another one of my beer recipes that I can say that I will recommend if you want to try and brew it. I definitely like it. Again, watch the video, make sure that you follow the decoction process thoroughly. You know, you gotta make sure you hit those temperatures. You gotta make sure you get your timing right and everything. You know, decoction mashing, it's still interesting to read some brewers say that decoction mashing doesn't make a difference, but really, I think it's only a matter of doing it right, and it takes practice to do it right. My first few decoction mashes were not exactly the best. You know, it took a while, but once you get it down, once you get used to that process, and you actually pay attention to the outcome of the beer, and you start looking for the specific flavors that you get from decoction mashing, you're going to notice the difference, and you're actually going to enjoy doing decoction mashes in the future. It doesn't really take that much longer. You know, it only adds, you know, maybe hour and a half, 2 hours to a brew day, which, I mean, personally, I don't think that's bad, considering the results that you get. So that's it for now. I hope you enjoy this beer if you decide to brew, and if you do, let me know what you think. So that's it. We'll see you next week. Talk to you later. Bye.